In biblical times, wedding receptions lasted for days and days, and it wasn't necessarily that the people at that time were any different than we are, any different than they wanted to enjoy the party a little bit more, but rather it was because many had to travel a long distance to get there to the wedding reception in order that they would be able to enjoy the company of the family or friends that were there. Even the city of Cana, it's about 6 or 7 miles outside of Nazareth. So it may not seem like a lot for us if we were going to a wedding reception that was 6 or 7 miles away, but at that particular time, they had to walk or take other modes of transportation on animals. So it would have been kind of a trek, and it was an effort to be able to be there. So once they were there, the guests who had been invited, then they were wanting to ensure that hospitality was something that was very critical and very, very important. I can only imagine, though, what the bill would be like for a wedding reception that lasted for 7 days. But they didn't seem to be too concerned about that because this particular couple, who we need to make sure we understand, we know nothing about. We know nothing about this couple except one thing. They knew who to invite into their life, and they knew who to invite into their marriage and to the reception. Maybe Jesus and his disciples were friends. Maybe they were family. Obviously, Mary was invited to the reception as well. But we know that, first of all, in every marriage, the Lord should be a part of it. The third party in any Christian marriage is not your mother-in-law. It is the presence of Jesus Christ. It is the presence of the Lord who is there to be able to support in the down times, but also in the very joyful times. It is the presence of the Lord to be able to be a stable factor in family life, to be a welcome guest at a dinner table. On any given night, when you think about your dinner table, and everybody usually sits at the same place, at any given night, is there a place there for Jesus? Is there a place for him to be at your party? Is there a place for him? Would you be proud to have him walk into a group of your own friends or family that were gathering and partake in what was going on and the activities of the event? But also, they were very wise to invite Jesus because obviously somewhere along the line some poor planning had taken place. And either the guests were just very, very thirsty, or maybe they just didn't have enough, period. And so the Lord really intervenes. And because he was invited into this situation, whether he saw that it was his time or not, Jesus was able to do something incredible in this place. This is from John's Gospel. Now, normally in this year C, we read from Luke's Gospel. Today, though, we read from John, take a little bit of a break from Luke. And in John's Gospel, notice he does not call this a miracle of the wedding at Cana, of the miracle of the changing of the water into wine. Rather, John says it is a sign. Signs point to things. Signs have deeper meaning. Signs draw us in and help us get a direction. So really in John's writing, what he is pointing to is the divinity of Christ. He is pointing to the glory of the Lord, who gives us great abundance, who gives us great hospitality, who serves us in a very beautiful way. And whether Jesus realized it was his time or not, he was very smart because he listened to his mother, but also he was very wise because he was able to really start something there that pointed to his greatness. And in a very humble way, he accepts that. He takes those simple jars. He sees them probably sitting there. These were jars that would have been used for something ceremonial. Perhaps in your own home, you have maybe fine china that you only use for certain events. Or maybe some sort of a utensil maybe that only comes out at Christmas or at Easter or for a family event. It's what these ceremonial jars would have been for, only used for the Feast of Purification, and they were empty. Jesus instructs, fill with water. We don't know what he said. There was no hocus pocus here that went on, that suddenly it changed in some magic words that we ourselves can follow if we want transformation in our own lives. But rather, it was the way in which the Lord took simple elements, something so ordinary, a wedding reception, water, people around, family and friends, something everyone can really relate to because Jesus was very normal. He was part of a family. But what he did was something so extraordinary. It was extraordinary because the element that was there, the water, that was placed into those vessels, and it was quite a bit. It was 180 gallons approximately. That would have been a lot of water. These were huge, heavy jars. Took something that was so bland, such as water, and he made it into something which was so rich, and that was the best of wine. It wasn't even normal wine, it was the best. The great irony here is, how is it that what was so usual became very unusual? Usually the cheaper wine is served last after the guests have no more taste left. But rather in this particular case, with Jesus, when he gets involved, we see that he gives only the best, and he gives it in great abundance. He gives it in great abundance. It's also the formation here of a change that is happening in the midst of the culture, taking something that was used for the Jewish culture, and then when Jesus gets involved, he came into the life of the church. We now have the beginnings of something that is much more, which was new, and it was something that was part of God's plan. Simple vessels, empty and hollow, filled with the ordinary, becoming extraordinary. Perhaps that's really what our own lives are like. If we really look at ourselves as people, and we only see the outside of what is there, we only are able to see what the eye can see. And we really deprive ourselves of what's on the inside. But we are not just material beings. We are not just on the outside like jugs that are sitting up on a shelf or on steps, not knowing what's on the inside. The Lord invites us today to go a little deeper, to go inside not only of ourselves, but perhaps those in our life whom we love the most. Think today of not only ourselves, but the people around us and how each one of us are vessels. Each one of us are vessels that aren't meant just to be statuesque and standing over in a corner, but we are involved. We relate to one another. We are not things, we are people. And because we are people, there is a preciousness and a dignity that is given to the human person that is given to nothing else that has been created. Because God poured into each one of us himself. He poured into each one of us his best. Maybe we don't always see the best in ourselves, but that is the gift of faith, to be able to have belief in what the eye cannot see and the assurance of things hoped for. So maybe even in ourselves, there are things that we do not see because maybe there is a wall or we only see the external, or those who are around us and closest to us. Maybe we do not actually see what is in there, but we are confident and we have faith that God does see something much more unique and precious there. Perhaps our vessel feels a little empty sometimes and hollow, seeking the presence of God. It is a hollow jug that makes the loudest sound. Maybe that cry that comes from within is seeking the presence and an encounter with the Almighty. Maybe our vessel is filled with a little too much vinegar. Is there an anger or a bitterness that exists within, perhaps because of the past and not being able to have the hope for the future? Is our vessel filled with the gift of honey, with maybe a sweetness that is natural, that is authentic, that is something that is very God-given and that breeds joy and can bring a soothing comfort to all whom it encounters. No matter what is in our vessel this morning, or those who are closest to us and around us, it is also up to us to make sure we invite the Lord into ourselves. As we receive him today in the precious gift of the Eucharist, his body and his blood, we are filled with a transforming grace that we never know where it is going to go, what the possibilities are, in the way that God gives us only his best. I hope that our vessels are all seeking a sense of the sacred, something that is holy, and that really involves three things: a separation from sin, a dedication to God in prayer, and a commitment to being formed in his image and in his likeness. I hope that today, as we sit here this morning, we can truly invite the Lord into ourselves, into what is going on within, into whatever is happening in our own life today, and say, Lord, please be with me. Give me an abundance of your love and your grace. And actually, for what we are asked to be told, maybe we should listen to the words of the Blessed Mother, as she said, do whatever he tells you.